Couple of days ago, there was an article in the New York Times entitled, "You don't have to take every tax deduction, and you shouldn't." I forwarded this to a colleague of mine, and her response was, "That's unhinged." And I have been thinking about it ever since then, and I have to agree with her. I think that's unhinged. Why would you not take a deduction? Well, the article went on to describe a dentist who felt like he needed to pay his fair share. So here's the question. Actually, I have a number of questions for you. The first question is, what is your fair share? Second question is, should you really not take a deduction that you're entitled to? And if you want to pay more to the government, can you do so voluntarily? So let's start with, should you take the deductions you're entitled to? And I would write my own article in response that said, you can take every deduction you're entitled to, and you should. And here's why. And I wrote this, in fact, I wrote an entire book about this concept called The Win-Win Wealth Strategy. It's behind me, and you can get it on Amazon or in the bookstore. The deductions that the government provides are there for a reason. They're not haphazard. They're not loopholes. They are not unintended consequences of lobbyists trying to get something as a general rule. Now, do lobbyists work for tax deductions? No question. Are there loopholes? No question. On the whole, though, it's important to understand, what's the tax law really there for? Some people would say, well, it's there to raise revenue. Well, if it were only there to raise revenue, the tax law would be a pamphlet, not a 6,000-page small print document followed by millions of pages of regulations, rulings, and court cases. In fact, the tax law is fairly simple in concept. There's one line that says all income's taxable unless we say it isn't. And there's another line that says no expense is deductible unless we say it is. So that means that any expense that is deductible is because Congress said this is deductible. Now, what's the rest of the tax law? That 6,000 plus pages. Well, it's basically an instruction guide on how to reduce your taxes, or a better way to put it perhaps is it is an instruction guide on doing what the government would like you to do. See, the tax law is not so complex because, oh, we have to prevent people from overstepping the bounds. Are there restrictions there? Absolutely. Are there rules for that? For sure. We want to be very clear. Congress wants to be very clear on what is a deduction and what is deductible and what is not. Okay, so for example, driving your kids to school, not deductible, right? No matter what. I mean, I cannot even fathom a time when that could be deductible. All right. However, spending money on your business to improve your business or to increase your profitability so that you can serve more people, that is in fact deductible. So let's look at this dentist as an example. Well, to me, this dentist has a job, not a calling, maybe a career. But this dentist's goal is, let me go to work, pay my taxes, and go home. And I want to make sure that I'm comfortable that I paid my fair share. That is the way many Americans right now are looking at the tax law. Then there's the other side of that coin, which is what I wrote about in my first book, Tax-Free Wealth, which has now come out in its third edition, and The Win-Win Wealth Strategy, which is the tax law is not just there to raise revenue, but it's actually to encourage certain activities. For example, now I doubt that this dentist would not take a tax deduction for a charitable contribution. I also seriously doubt that he would not take a deduction for his home mortgage interest. Both of those are incentives. They're incentives that are widely accepted as socially acceptable incentives. Now, why is a deduction for home mortgage interest a socially acceptable incentive? Why is it that we believe in America that home ownership is more valuable than renting? You don't get a deduction for renting a home. You only get a deduction for buying a home. Well, this was decided back in the 1940s, where the government said, look, we think that people who own their home, that creates a stable workforce, and we would like more people to be able to own a home. Remember that the United States was born on the proposition of property ownership. You can look it up, and whether you want to read the Federalist Papers or whatever, wherever you want to go, how about the US Constitution that is very clear that property ownership is a core tenet of being a citizen or a resident of the United States of America. It is why people are lining up at the border to get in to the United States of America with the idea of the American dream, which the American dream is property ownership. So to not take a deduction, what is that really saying? Well, you shouldn't take all your deductions. Well, first of all, it's saying you frankly, I don't think, understand the tax law. You don't understand that the tax law is there as a mechanism to encourage behavior by the US government. This is, by the way, not just true in the US. I studied 15 different countries when I wrote the Win-Win Wealth Strategy and found that all governments do this worldwide. And they do this for the simple reason that there are certain behaviors they would like to encourage. For example, they would love that dentist to open more dental practices, to serve more people, to be able to provide dental health to more people. Well, all of the expenses in doing that would be deductible. I would certainly hope that that dentist is thinking that his or hers work with a patient is valuable to society, despite the fact that he or she makes money on it. So the fact of creating a profit, somehow that has become a dirty word in US society, in many parts of US society. I think making a profit is a very noble endeavor. Why? Because as I was talking to a friend of a friend at dinner the other night, this friend had spent many years in a quote unquote nonprofit, which another term for that nonprofit is tax exempt. And she was asking me, should I, she fell out of favor in the tax, in the nonprofit. She ended up leaving. There was a lot of stress. It's a whole nother story. She said, should I try another nonprofit? I said, well, what didn't you like about the nonprofit? She said, well, it seemed like it was all about power. I said, well, this is the challenge. When you take profit away, really people have two primary motivations. Now, that's not to say that people aren't altruistic, but you really there are two primary motivations, and one is money and one is power. And if you take the money away, you end up with power. And that's exactly what had happened with her. And I said, try a for-profit organization that accomplishes your goals to serve society. That way, you will have the capital to serve more people. That is the reason for business deductions. The reason for business deductions, the reason, for example, that Tesla didn't pay taxes for many years, that Amazon didn't pay taxes for many years, is that when you're starting a business, and for those of you who have not started a business, I get that this might be hard to comprehend, but when you're starting a business, you're putting your heart and soul, all of your time, all of your energy, a lot of your health into this business. And the last thing you need is to be taxed when you have no profits. In fact, we would have no businesses. I'm going to say that again. We would have no businesses if we were taxed on our gross income, that is on our gross revenue, rather than on our net income, which is after deductions. There would be no business in the United States. There would be no iPhone. There would be no Tesla cars. There would be no SpaceX. There would practically be nothing except what the government provided, which brings me to another point. Who is more effective in spending your money? You or the government? Do you believe that the government should provide all services to the public? That would be called communism, right? Where the government owns all of the property and provides all of the services. That is communism. If that's what you believe, that's fine. It's just not the US. That is something that is propagated by people outside the US. And it pains me to see people inside the US thinking that that is a good idea. We have not seen communism work, despite what certain professors might say. Communism failed. There was a reason it failed. And it wasn't weak leadership, it was the system. Now, even in China, which says they have a communist party, in fact, has capitalism, and they have property ownership. Why has China become the economic power that has become today? Because of capitalism. Now, how does capitalism relate to tax deductions? Well, most tax deductions are an incentive for capitalism. They're incentive to put your money into an investment that produces more for other people. I would say that those who take the most deductions legally are probably doing the most good in the world. And now I'm hearing a lot of no way, that's not true. No, those are just greedy rich people. Okay, well, let's look at it. The US government built rockets for many, many years, sent men to the moon. And we're all proud of that. NASA has not been successful in recent years outside of launching satellites here and there. Along comes Elon Musk and SpaceX. And because of a profit motive, Elon Musk decides we need to be able to reuse the rockets. He just postulated what needs to happen in order for launching rockets to be financially successful. And what's the biggest cost? And the biggest cost is the rockets are used once and then they're discarded, either in space or they burn up in the atmosphere, but they are discarded. So he devised a way with his team to land what effectively is a 40-story building on a pad in the middle of the ocean. Frankly, a modern miracle, unbelievable engineering feat. But why did he do it? He did it because he has a profit motive. Had he not had a profit motive, like NASA didn't have a profit motive, no reason to reuse that rocket. The only reason is a profit motive. So as a result, Elon Musk has launched more rockets into space, and the Ukraine has used those Starlink satellites to keep them in the war with Russia. Whether you think they should be or should not be in the war with Russia, whether you think or do not think that they're entitled to defend themselves, the fact that they had Elon Musk's satellites has been a tremendous benefit to the Ukrainian military, has kept them in the war. That's according to Zelensky, President Zelensky himself. So that does not happen without a profit motive. The government didn't do that. So this is why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurs. And this is why I'm so passionate about people understanding the tax law. Now let's just go to something more simple. I mentioned charitable contributions and that deduction. Do you think that the government is better at serving charity than charities are at serving charitable purposes? Well, if you look at the statistics, charities are far more successful and far more efficient because they have to be more careful. They have to raise funds. They don't get tax revenues. It's not automatic. So are there things we need taxes for? Absolutely. Transportation, military, we need taxes for that. Now, I will admit I'm a bit of a libertarian. I believe that we should have smaller government, not bigger government. The reason I believe that is because I believe that you are better equipped and better at using your money than the government is. Now, let me go to my other point that I brought up at the very beginning. If you want to contribute to the government, can you? Yes, you can. There's a box you can mark on your 1040, your tax return, and you can add additional money to donate to the federal government. What's curious to me is I have never even met one person who did that. I interviewed a gentleman on my podcast, The Wealthability Show, a while back, and he was part of this group that's millionaires for more taxes on millionaires. And I'm going, I don't understand. You can mark your box anytime you want. You can pay more tax. And he was indignant. He goes, wait a minute, I'm not going to pay more tax if everybody doesn't have to pay more tax. And all I'm thinking is, so you don't really believe in your cause. If you did, you would start by paying more tax. You would start by voluntarily contributing. That is a much better solution. If you want to pay your fair share and you believe that paying more tax is a good thing, rather than not take a deduction, which the article is correct. You're not forced to take deductions. Remember, no expense is deductible unless the government says it is. So you have to prove a deduction. However, wouldn't it be better if you actually took that deduction and had that money to spend on noble purposes? And if you felt like one of the noble purposes was donating to the government, mark the box on your 1040 and donate to the government. I would like to see a statistic on how many people actually mark that box and donate to the government. That's something I would be interested in. So if you really feel like you're not paying enough tax, mark the box. Don't turn down the tax deduction, please, because at that point, what are you doing? Frankly, you're bastardizing the Internal Revenue Code. You are ignoring what the government wants you to do by not taking that deduction or by not investing the way the government wants you to invest, whether it's to create jobs, to create housing, new forms of energy, or to grow food. See, these are things that all have government incentives. These are where those deductions are. They're not in the loopholes. Okay, are there loopholes? Should they be closed? I'm all for that. Absolutely. Loopholes are loopholes, and we should do our best to eliminate those loopholes. But I'm going to tell you that things like a like-kind exchange in real estate, where you're allowed to sell one piece of real estate and buy a new piece of real estate without paying tax, not a loophole. That is a way to keep the real estate market liquid or more liquid, meaning that you can have more transactions without the drag of taxes. Or the idea of, can a corporation merge with another corporation and not pay tax? Well, that is to prevent the drag of taxes on those mergers. Now, you can, if you feel like there's an antitrust lawsuit, go for it. That's fine. But taxes should not be the way that is accomplished. Rather, let's use taxes for what they do best, which is, first of all, raise revenue for essential government services. Now, of course, everybody's got a different idea of what essential is. And let's remember that the tax law is not just there to raise revenue. The tax law is also there to incentivize behaviors that the government wants you to do. So you get to choose. Are you a silent partner with the government, or are you an active partner with the government? I'll close with this. Every deduction to which you're entitled, you can take, and you should take. That's what the government wants you to do, not just what you should do for your personal reasons, but you are better at using your money than the government, and the government allows you to do that. So why would you not use that money the way you want to use it? And if you want to donate it back to the government, feel free to do so. Thanks very much. Remember that making way more money and paying way less tax is important, because that allows us to have more capital to do more good in the world. Thanks, everyone.